people on the internet versus people in real life. Thankfully, people in real life are a lot more sensible and reasonable, aren't they? I don't know if you've had anything like go viral, but I've got quite a lot of interest on Reddit for some project that I was working on, and a lot of people were very nasty. Like, why have you written it in JavaScript? It's an outrage.
Hello, and you're listening to Off Script. Today we're going to be talking about lessons learned from building communities. So today we're going to talk about lessons learned from building communities.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one.
I guess before we get into that, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good, yeah. Quite
Surviving.
a meeting-heavy week, but yeah, surviving.
Isn't that most weeks?
Most weeks of that.
Yeah.
We've got our next events booked in, so we've got Applied AI Leads version number 3.
That's coming up in a few weeks, isn't it?
That's in a few weeks.
Wonderful.
And then the day after, we're doing a podcast live, so Off Script live, which will be really good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
That's technology funk-ups
or fuck-ups.
On fuck-ups.
I'm looking forward to that. There's some good examples from history we can learn from. So I think that'll be a good live recording in front of an audience.
Yeah, the trick is to figure out which of our own mess-ups we can put in there without
getting sued. Yeah. I think it's really important to learn from your mistakes, but not when you're going to get sued.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be fine. A lot of them are from early on in my career when I didn't know what I was doing even more so than that. Yeah.
I'm looking for. I remember my first job. I deleted the entire assets folder for a client.
Yeah.
So there's some good stuff we can dig into.
Oh there. yeah. Some blood, sweat, and tears. Mostly tears.
Yeah, it was back in the FTP days as well when there was no recovery whatsoever.
FileZilla can't save you.
No. But no, I'm actually buzzing today because you just told me I made you a passable tea.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. How are you doing? Are you okay?
I'm all right, like you. I'm surviving. I think meeting heavy few weeks. It's that point at the end of the year now where everyone's starting to panic and try and plan for the next year, reflecting on achievements and missed opportunities and looking at how we can do better next year. So quite fun for me. Just joined Glean, so doing all that planning, getting to learn a lot.
Yeah. Glean's looking like they're doing really well as well. It's a very interesting product. Good time to get stuck in with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's really exciting things around the corner. So hopefully be able to talk about them a bit more in the new year. But yeah, all good. Looking forward to Christmas actually, and we've got some nice little. I'm going to FF Conf actually this Friday.
Nice.
Which by the time this probably goes out, it'll be been and gone. But yeah, looking forward to that. It's always an amazing conference that Remy and Julie do. So. And
they've asked you to be a backup speaker because of COVID. Yes. They've learned that. Yeah. If they don't have those, they just end up with half an empty schedule.
Yeah, it's such a different world, isn't it, these days? Because we never used to have to worry too much about it. If someone had a cold or, it's quite rare that someone had an illness that would really stop them coming to a conf.
Yeah, I've seen people muddle through with sore throats and stuff, and it's fine. But it's less acceptable now, especially if you've got COVID. So yeah, you can't really go and mix and socialise when you've got COVID. It's not a very sensible idea, obviously. So yeah, people don't want to fly and things like that. So
yeah, so I was honoured to be asked just to be the backup speaker, to be honest. So hopefully it won't be needed, and hopefully it'll all go to plan. So yeah, looking forward to being an attendee, if nothing else, at that conference. It's always a brilliant one, and Brighton's just a wicked city. I absolutely love Brighton.
Yeah, it's so good.
So yeah. So we're going to talk about lessons learned from building communities today. This came up because I was kind of writing a conference talk for next year in general and wanted to reflect on my own experiences building the conference and everything around that, really. So it's quite an interesting exercise just to kind of write down what makes up a good community.
Yeah. And you've been community building for a long time.
Yeah.
So we know each other sort of through the Hay events and stuff. So
yeah, it feels like we've known each other a lot longer than what's probably,
a decade, maybe.
A decade, yeah. Actually, it's quite a while.
Yeah, that's a long while. When you say decade, that sounds like a long time.
Yeah, but yeah, no, so it's been quite an important part of my life, and writing this down was quite a good fun exercise, actually.
Nice.
But then I guess when I started to write some of these things down, I realised that I needed to acknowledge my own position and privilege in the whole process. Being kind of a white guy in tech affords me certain things that others wouldn't have when setting up events and things like that. So I kind of wanted to state that as a kind of entrance. I won't go into this, but yeah, I think one of the things that I kind of figured out is it's really hard to build communities.
It is, yeah. It's not just slinging something on Eventbrite and badgering everyone, although that is part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot harder than that. What do you think the struggles were when you first started? Because it was in the Faversham, wasn't it? The first events that I remember.
Yeah, I think doing it in a student union style pub is a challenge.
Yeah, we had a few incidents where people were running in screaming.
Yeah. People on very different levels. Like I talk about CSS and someone's trying to get as drunk as possible.
Yeah.
Don't always collaborate.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, some of the attendees were also trying to get as drunk as possible.
Yeah, I mean, free bars and stuff. You learn. Yeah, you learn easily. But I don't know. It's kind of there's no shortcuts either to starting a community. I think it's really hard for you individually as well if you're starting something, because a lot of the time people won't turn up to what you're doing.
Yeah.
For one reason or another, it might just be a quiet week. People might be busy. It might not be an interesting event. But when people don't turn up, that's pretty hard going.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you've paid money to book the venue or you put money behind the bar.
Yeah.
And you sat there and there's 3 people in front of you.
Yeah. That's always, I think, when you take that fear to like the bigger events as well, there's always the fear of like, I've put money into this conference. Is it going to sell out? Is it going to get enough people? Bums on seats. So when you start to see tickets come in, you kind of like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. Well, I've started compiling a list of events to attend next year and comparing it to previous years. It's slim pickings at the moment.
Oh, really?
Either people are not announcing yet and waiting to see what demand's like, or some of them have just stopped. I'm not sure.
Do you mean specifically conferences?
Specifically conferences rather than meetups and events, yeah.
Well, we've seen a few. What was the big one in Amsterdam? The CSS Day, was it, that pulled? Yeah. One of them, quite a big one. Yeah, it's becoming increasingly harder to put on events. People commit really late on the day, or just not fancying those sorts of events anymore. And it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one kind of thing. If you've got an event that you've eyeballed for in the future, buy a ticket, show the organizer that there's interest, because otherwise it might get pulled.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think one of the first things that I started to look into is trust. Trust is obviously a big part of communities. I kind of made the point in writing this talk that if you look on the internet, it's quite hard to trust people because the internet's full of horrendous people.
Yes, it is.
But part of it is building kind of this environment of trust. You have to trust that people will be good to you and act in good faith. But also just kind of, instead of looking for the bad traits in people, look at the differences that kind of make us what we are, and try and confront your own fears and biases around all that sort of stuff. It's hard though, isn't it? It's hard.
It is hard. Yeah. I think people on the internet versus people in real life. Thankfully, people in real life are a lot more sensible and reasonable, aren't they? I don't know if you've had anything like go viral, but I've got quite a lot of interest on Reddit for some project that I was working on, and a lot of people were very nasty. Like, why have you written it in JavaScript? It's an outrage.
It's amazing how angry people get, and I understand it's important to have passionate debates about certain things, but equally, there's people behind the keyboards, and we need to just remember that.
Yeah, I mean, X, Twitter is the sort of cesspool of the internet, isn't it? And
if you call it X again, I'm going to have to.
Yeah,
I refuse to call it X.
But they're going to put a sheen of AI over the top now, aren't they?
Yeah, that'll make it better.
That's going to help.
Yeah.
Not petrol on the fire at all.
I trust the bots to definitely articulate their thoughts in a much better way than humans.
Yeah, Elon and dumpster truck of opinions. What could possibly happen? What could possibly go wrong?
Exactly. But yeah, I think the more I dug into it, the more I realised that you kind of build this risk aversion from previous experiences. So if you go to an event, for example, and you have a terrible time, you're probably not going to go to many events in the future, or you're going to colour things in proximity to events with the same sort of feelings, which is like, okay, social occasions, work events, hobbies. Like, it can make you quite insular when you have a bad experience in these sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've been to some events where it feels like a sales pitch, and it's a free event, fine, but it kind of puts you off a bit, doesn't it?
I hate the link. Like the LinkedIn influencer sort of wanky events where you just got a recruitment consultancy who have possibly just not thought about it. Thought, how can we get as many people in here with free beer and pizza and sell some shit to you?
Yeah, and there's recruiters that do it right, like James Westwood.
Absolutely.
And they know that the content is the key part of the event, and they're just there to support. And if you need them, but it's not front and centre, and they're not overly pushy at all, and that's what it needs to be.
No, I think at the last live event we did with Work Digital, actually, James kind of spent a bit of time at the start was talking about community, actually, and not talking really about work in any particular detail, and that's kind of, they're playing an active part in supporting communities, and that's what we need to be seeing, really.
Yeah, you just know they're there if you need them, but it's not like, very pushy sort of recruiter style thing that you get.
Yeah, and that kind of goes on to the next point, which is like they are playing the long game. They're going through the kind of process of building their own community within what they're doing, and that's where that consistency is crucial. Consistency is what makes communities grow. There are definitely no shortcuts to building communities, and they just take a lot of time and effort organically building most of the time.
Yeah, definitely. We had a good go at that with the Leeds Soup events, didn't we? And we did get into a good run of it, but it just sort of fizzled a little bit, especially we had COVID and all the rest of it.
I think COVID was one of the things, but also I think it's immensely time consuming to run it. So Leeds Soup was an event that we ran, which was like a charity event where it was almost like Dragon's Den for charity funds, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it was really quite well received in Leeds. We had some really good attendance, and we held quite a few events, probably raised about 20 grand in total, I think, something like that. But I think we just kind of lost the momentum with it because it was just a hell of a lot to organise alongside everything else.
On top of a job that feels more than full-time already. It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, which is, I have a lot of respect for. We met an amazing chap called Ash through the Soup events that runs a charity initiative in Hare Hills called Catch.
Yeah.
And he's committed his entire life to this, basically. He's not taken holidays because he's been volunteering. I have so much respect for people that throw that level of energy into a community.
Yeah, Ash is great.
Something else, isn't it, really? So kind of started to reflect on my own journey, started to look at how I started these events in Leeds and how it grew from the Faversham, like you mentioned earlier, going through COVID, building the conference. I actually did some stats, and over 5,000 people have kind of come to the events over the years, which is pretty cool, considering it was just a small pub meetup to start with.
Nice.
So then started to look at what makes a good community. And this is where you start to get into the guts of some of the more challenging things that you have to look inwardly about how things make you feel. So it's much harder than coding.
Yeah.
You've got to think about your feelings and think about how interactions make you feel. And look at good examples of communities that make you feel kind of safe and vulnerable, I guess. And for me, some of those spaces are like club environments and music environments where, it's not really about the participants, it's the collective being together that kind of makes it something nice.
Yeah. And the Hay events always had that nice feeling where you could sort of join any conversation. It was very social.
Yeah.
Whereas, some events you go to and it's quite sterile sort of feeling. And don't know how, they can't really explain how you change it, but you can it's just lots of little things, isn't it?
I think so. I think it starts with the environment, doesn't it? So, the Faversham wasn't a good example of this because there was just a few chairs, but there were some sofas in the room as well.
I think lighting and music are important, which a lot of people just miss.
Yeah.
Because it's just, we'll sling some pizzas in the middle of the office, which you can do, but it's not really going to work.
When you've got really stark office lighting, and it just doesn't make people feel comfortable. It makes them feel very on show, I think.
Yeah, we're giving out the secrets of the game away now, aren't we?
Yeah. Keep the pizzas going, keep them going. But I think when we moved to the Belgrave, that was a big change because we had loads of sofas, low lighting, wasn't networky unless you felt like you wanted to.
Yeah.
That was quite a big thing. But then I started to kind of dig a bit deeper and think about, well, what are the things that kind of make those interactions better with what interactions feel comfortable. And I started to draw comparisons between like communities and teams in like a professional context.
Yeah.
And then we're doing a lot of stuff with like team building, healthy teams at the moment with Glean, and we were kind of drawn back into that 5 Dysfunctions of a Team book by Patrick Lencioni. I think you know this.
Great book, yeah.
It's an amazing book, and I would recommend you read it because it talks about these kind of 5 pillars that define like traits of a dysfunctional team. So the kind of pillars are absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. And if you look at like them and how they cross over into the world of communities, there's a lot of similarities, and I got quite excited drawing these similarities when I was going through the dysfunction stuff.
Nice.
What have you learned from the dysfunctions?
I think it's on the trust level. It's being vulnerable, so letting people know your weaknesses, which I think you've sort of been brought up to think, I need to compete with other people, and I need to be better than other people, and that obviously is good driver. But what that causes is some negative aspects, which is like to try and conceal weaknesses or failings, and to make it look like the only output that you have is perfect. Yeah. And actually that's quite toxic, because it means that other people feel that they can't fail. Yeah. And then you just end up with this culture where no one wants to admit its mistakes or failings. And that's the trusting, but it plays into some of the other dysfunctions as well.
Yeah, I was about to say, because that's similar to number 4, which is the avoidance of accountability. And if you don't have trust and you're not honest in your kind of interactions there, it's really hard to like trace, where things go wrong and put them right. But the kind of, I forgot to mention, the 5 dysfunctions is like a pyramid, isn't it? So they're all dependent on each other, and trust is the foundational value. I think there's something in the book, it talks about like successful people are taught to be protective. You mentioned kind of that competitive nature, I guess, is kind of that protectiveness.
Yeah, that's it. And I guess, social stuff and getting to know people on a personal level is really good for trust as well. Yeah. Because it builds bridges, and when you need a favour, you can't, if you're really in the shit, you can't just shout. No. You need to help me. That's completely the wrong thing to do.
If you get to that point, you know that the wheels are coming off, really.
You need not bank favours, but like if you need to help people out, and you need to know them inside out as well. Otherwise they won't help you when you're stuck.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I think sharing experiences with your peers kind of builds this trust, and that was one of the things I think we did early on in the events. It's like, it's about storytelling. It's about sharing those failures, like we're going to be doing in a few weeks' time, and empathy and relatability play a large part in this. And Sharon Steed's done loads of good work on this. If you've known Sharon,
I met Sharon. Yes, great.
She's awesome. But she talks a lot about kind of empathy, and from her own experiences, like having a speaking impediment, like how that's affected her. And it's quite impressive, some of the stuff. So if you haven't seen Sharon's stuff, I think on the Hey Present site there's a talk or two from Sharon.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I spoke alongside her at Beyond Tellerand, I think it was.
Oh, nice. Yeah, she's great. Also lovely to hang out with, and loves wine. So if you like wine, I like wine too. So.
Yeah, I think we were doing shots actually.
Sorry, doing you a disservice there, Sharon. Apologies. But yeah, so the second kind of aspect of the 5 dysfunctions is the fear of conflict, and I'm sure we both experienced situations where we have had situations where there's been conflict in a very negative way, right?
Yeah, and this is an area that I'm not good at, but it's kind of a personality thing. It depends on your childhood, how you react to conflict. Some people like lean into it. Yeah, like American culture, like you get your sort of gunner type personality when they're like, I thrive with conflict, and they go about it the wrong way. So I think there's like, you can either be too avoidant or too eager for conflict. You want to just be in the middle. Yeah. And it's a fine balance.
I think that's it is quite cultural as well, as you said. I think I remember a team that I was in where there was someone who was just really up for conflict, but there wasn't the trust in the team.
Yeah,
and it was every interaction that was like, actually looking back on it, the conflict was there to try and get some good outcomes, but the intentions were not so good.
Yeah. If people feel attacked, then it's not good, because you start hurting feelings and like trampling on their area of expertise. And what you don't want is just the loudest person in the room shouting and
that's
winning.
The worst.
Yeah. But yeah, it's tricky, and it very much depends on the team dynamics, I find. Like sometimes you'll need to sort of make sure that the quietest person in the room is actually speaking up. Sometimes
that's really hard. Like, I'm sure you've facilitated plenty of meetings where you've recognised that the inputs from certain people are not as big as you'd like. You try to elevate that, but that's also quite hard, because some people only speak when they really feel comfortable speaking.
And also you don't want to be like, what do you think? And then put them on the spot. Although a little bit of that's nice, but it depends on the person. They might think that you're an absolute arsehole for doing that. I don't know. Yeah.
But again, if you've got the trust there, then it's a lot easier, right? Because they trust that you're just trying to support them, not throw them under a bus.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you've got artificial harmony on one side, and then you've got like just cruel, horrible conflict on the other.
Yeah.
And they're both bad. If everyone's just pretending everything's fine, that is really bad. Because
in the book, it's that sliding scale, isn't it? They have I think it's like the fear of conflict is boring meetings. Cruel conflict is like argument happening disrespectfully, horrendous situation, right?
Yeah, messy collaboration is. I know that's not the term they use in the book, but that's the term that I like, because it's like, let's bring all of our problems for like closer to the beginning of the project and get them done, rather than just this happy, you do the design and I'll do the back end. And at some point it'll all work out, because it doesn't.
But also that kind of, and it's not quite right, but you did your best. So no, let's talk about why it's not right.
Being too nice is just going to delay the inevitable, which is that conversation when it doesn't actually work. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think it's really interesting looking into the kind of dynamics of that. I think it's stated in the book, teams that fear conflict ignore controversial topics. They end up having back channel discussions, and it just wastes energy. And I think that's a really interesting lesson to take forward.
Yeah, definitely.
So the kind of third step of this is lack of commitment. So committing to a decision or a direction. A decision is better than no decision is the general kind of gist of this, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's tricky. As a founder, company owner, obviously your commitment to a project is very different to someone else's.
Yeah.
And it's quite difficult. Like, I think the book sort of, the opening introductions, like how you as a founder can be quite different from an employee. But yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because what you've got, obviously no one's going to care about the business as much as you do.
No.
And how do you get that into, how do you sort of bridge the gap?
I think it goes back to that original pillar of trust works both ways. Like, you need to trust that your employees have the best intentions for the business, and it's not always about like try the hardest you can. It's not really about that. And I think actually a large part of commitment is about inclusion. And if you feel like you're not part of a decision or you can't contribute to a decision, it grows resentment, and resentment leads to lack of commitment.
Yes, that's it. And a lot of people don't need their opinion. Their decision doesn't need to be the right decision. Like, so let's say everyone disagrees, but the team decide that the different direction is the right way to go. A lot of people will disagree and commit, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
I know I didn't get my way this time, but the team have decided, so let's just get on with it. Yeah,
it's about the collective winning, not you winning individually. And the disagree and commit thing's a big thing we've been talking about recently. It's like, we kind of hash out all the perspectives. We talk through the different options. At the end of the day, if we feel like collectively we've made the right decision, we commit and we move forward.
Yeah, that's it. That's important.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so the fourth pillar of it is avoidance of accountability. And accountability is key, not just in teams, but in everyday life, obviously. Being accountable for your own shit is important.
It is, yeah.
Don't see enough of it in some areas, like to, but no, I think it's just an important life lesson, really. I think you can only really be accountable if those pillars we mentioned before are present. So you're comfortable in conflict, you trust your team, you're committed to the outcomes.
Yeah, if people are in a happy team and working in like sprint or agile, and people can put their hands up and say, I'm going to own this, and that's what you want. And I think agile scrum's a good way of doing that, fostering that.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can feel like, depending on the team, like you're almost forcing stuff onto people.
It's hard, isn't it? Because like, as a facilitator in those scenarios, you want to so you're going to take that? Are you comfortable with that? All good?
Yeah, the best team members will stick their hand up for the hard stuff and grab it by the horns.
But also like accepting it's how yes, I'll own this. I'm not sure how it's going to go.
Yeah, and I might need help, or actually could we make it a spike instead of the actual thing itself, or whatever it is that they need to do to push back.
Yeah,
like to bite off the right amount for them to feel comfortable to take it as theirs.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing is if people don't do that, and it goes back to the other points around the conflict avoidance. If they just say, okay, I'll have a go, and then they've avoided the conflict then, but then the conflict's going to come in 2 weeks' time at the end of the sprint when they go, I had no fucking idea what I was doing. Well, you could have told us that at the beginning of the sprint, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think there's a quote from the book that I like, which is the enemy of accountability is ambiguity. That is very true. Like, you can only be accountable for things that you understand.
Oh yeah, if it's fluffy as hell, which a lot of client briefs are, we need to unfluffy it and what are the solid things that we can actually do.
I mean, it's teams that are accountable identify problems quicker. It's easy to trace accountable actions and avoid that bureaucracy that makes all that sort of stuff just absolute hell.
Yeah, 100%.
And then, so finally, you've got kind of inattention to results, which is kind of achieving the objectives that you set out to deliver. Effective teams focus on collective rather than individual outcomes. And that's something that's quite hard to do in teams, I feel, like get that shared ownership of a deliverable.
Yeah.
It's challenging.
Very tricky, especially when people feel like a small part of the puzzle, but everyone is a cog, I suppose. But it can be quite tricky to feel ownership of that, and
I think back to what we were saying about some of the conflicts as well. The desires sometimes get in the way. So like a single person wanting to take all the glory for something, and that's the sort of stuff that's really challenging, because I think people who strive to take the glory in that way aren't actually. I believe that the good intentions are there. I don't believe that it's something like just me. I think it's more that they're just trying to drive that outcome, but sometimes it comes over as an individual win rather than a group win.
Yeah, and you sometimes get people focusing on the wrong things if they'll do the thing that they think they can do and ignore the wider team goals. So they'll make a big old document about something, and then that's their output for the sprint. It's like, well, that's not really helped where we're going, but thank you.
Thanks for it, but
but you know where we're going, right? But it's tricky. It's.
I think the thing that I took away from all of this is communication's really fucking hard.
It is. It is. And people got, let's say they're not on the project full time, or they're going through a difficult personal time, or whatever it is. They might not want to fully commit, and if you're getting a sense of that, it might be worth just chatting to them one-to-one and unpicking it, and either giving them more time or whatever it is they need to support them.
I think that's the thing, is like these things are inherently messy, and sometimes they will not become less messy.
No, and finding out about what the mess is not going to fix it, but it's the first step, isn't it?
It's understanding kind of some of the key challenges that you've got as a team. As you said, like if someone's going through a difficult personal time, you can support that person better knowing that and knowing how some of those challenges in the five dysfunctions play into what they're going through, right? So.
To know that you need people to put their hand up and say, I don't know, or I can't do this, or I'm struggling or something.
Yeah. So when we'd gone through those like 5 points, I was like, isn't this a bit of a tedious link back to kind of communities? And I don't think so, because there's a decent amount of research into all this sort of stuff. And I think the way that people behave professionally at work is very much similar to the way they behave in communities or at home, or, a lot of people are who they are at work when they're at home. So I think it's important to look at how these things are similar. And like, if you look at things on the 5 pillars, so like absence of trust, if we don't trust an organizer or a group, we will not participate in that event at all, really.
That's it.
Like, examples of like good events that you've been to, often you start with that kind of base level of trust that the organizer is going to do right by you, support you, the code of conduct is correct, those sorts of things. And then like moving on to fear of conflict, like if we don't challenge opposing ideas, we end up with this like closed view of the world, which I think conferences are amazing at, right?
It opens you to other ideas and ways of thinking, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even count on one hand how many conference talks I've seen that have just really made me think differently about a subject or really reconsider my view completely. I think that's quite an important part.
Yeah, definitely.
And then like lack of commitment. If we don't make decisions that take us out of our comfort zone, how can we progress? I think the commitment thing in this context is about your personal commitment to improving yourself, learning more. I think communities play a big part in that.
Yeah, I think, giving talks as well, being part of the community, if the best way to learn something is to teach it as well. So get people involved in public speaking, which I think some of the speakers on the circuit now did their first events with you as well, didn't they? So it's like a good leg up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here you go. Off you go into the industry.
Yeah. All the best.
Good luck.
Yeah. I think that platform for like getting kind of people onto the stage is a really important one. I think as well, like the kind of avoidance of accountability step is, I think as nice as I've discussed some of these things, there's also examples of bad actors in the community, and I think being accountable for your actions and owning when people make mistakes, not about cancel culture, not about just writing them off, but learning from mistakes, understanding why interactions at events maybe weren't the most positive or mistakes were made and learning from them. Obviously I'm talking about like some of the more mild cases of this. If someone's done something horrendous, they should be called out for it.
I think thankfully the most people in the space play quite nicely, but there's been a few, hasn't there? But
yeah, I think if you look at like a modern code of conduct, it's quite self-regulating these days. I think a lot of people are quite happy to signpost to negative experiences, and obviously organisers can do what they need to do then. But
and even like just an inclusivity, like you'll now find that conferences are really trying to make sure it's not an all-white male lineup. By opening up to calls for speakers and stuff, and actually reaching out to people, and you do a really good job at that with the Hay conference, and it is good.
Thanks. I think it's the responsibility of an organizer to try and do that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess there's kind of you could get sucked into the kind of LinkedIn influencer bullshit with some of this dysfunction stuff. It's worth saying, like, depending on where you read it and whose take you read on that sort of stuff, there's loads of different angles on it. But I do think the principles outlined in 5 dysfunctions are good, and they're a good foundation for the discussion we're having here, but also just like healthy discussions amongst leadership teams and things like that.
Yeah, just don't use them as blunt instruments to get your way. Or write a really lengthy LinkedIn post.
That's the thing. If you start to use it as like, but you said conflict's great.
I told him it was whatever. That's not what we meant.
No, we didn't mean do that. But yeah, I guess the kind of final point is that there are givers and takers. So there's a really good TED talk by Adam Grant called "Are You a Giver or Taker?" Shout out to Gwen Diagram actually from my team who shared this with me. It's a really good talk. Gwen sent it me. I was like, that's great. Because it talks about people who constantly give, constantly take, those who match kind of their behavior to certain personality types. But yeah, it's worth a watch as well. We'll put the link to this in the show notes.
Oh, nice. Looks like there's a book as well.
Oh, is there? Oh, nice.
But yeah, I will have a look.
Ace. Oh, well, if that's a book. Also, Spotify have just released loads of audiobooks on premium, so it might be on there too.
That's good.
But yeah, it's a really interesting. Adam talks about what the makeup of successful teams. It's not all givers, it's not all takers, it's not all matchers. It's interesting the way he talks about the science behind it. Definitely worth a watch if you are interested in that sort of thing.
Amazing. Sounds really cool.
But yeah, I think that's kind of generally the gist of this talk. I don't think I've really missed anything from our conversations previously, have I?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think that'll be a good talk. And yeah, I think dysfunctions and community building, I do have a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
So thanks for running us through.
Yeah, thanks for the chat. Speak soon.
Cheers.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Off Script. Hit subscribe to get more episodes from us in the future, and we'll see you next time.